Welcome back to Much Ado About Nerd Things. My name is Lin and we're here to talk about who Evan Peters is playing in WandaVision. So, WandaVision episode 5 ends with one hell of a cliffhanger. Wanda opens the door and Evan Peters is there and seemingly acting like he's Pietro, Wanda's brother. And Wanda just seems to accept it. Well, quick refresher for those people who are not in the know. The problem with that is, that's not Pietro. Because Aaron Taylor Johnson played the MCU Pietro before he ran into one of his greatest weaknesses, bullets. Evan Peters played Peter Maximoff in the Fox X-Men movies, before Disney bought Fox, so Marvel no longer have to share their toys. So the two obvious answers for what's happening here seems to be that they have either recasted Quicksilver, or we're finally getting that X-Men crossover into the MCU. Except, on closer inspection, it certainly is neither of those. Let me elaborate. The first and more obvious option seems to be that they've recasted Quicksilver with the actor who played the more popular version of him. No shade to Aaron Taylor Johnson here, it's just that what are essentially music videos featuring Quicksilver are the only thing in the last few X-Men movies that they have put real effort into. And having been in 3 movies instead of dying of lead overdose after 1, Evan Peters' Quicksilver is clearly more recognizable version of the character. So why would this not be just a simple recast? Well, the episode explicitly tell us this isn't the case, because Darcy Lewis says,
"She recast Pietro?"
If the show have actually recasted Quicksilver, in the fiction this would be how Pietro have always looked like when they recasted War Machine. The characters in the show definitely wouldn't recognize that it's a different person. But here, Darcy knows that's not what Pietro looks like. So in the MCU, Pietro definitely looked like Aaron Taylor Johnson, and this episode explicitly wants us to know that. And plus, his last line to the Vision is, "What's a popsicle?" Meaning that he doesn't know who the Vision is. But MCU Pietro have met the Vision. He was there when the Vision was born, and he fought alongside Vision in Sokovia. So this is not the MCU Pietro. Hence, this is not a simple recast. So our second option, that is the X-Men Quicksilver. I know this option get a lot of people excited, and they won't like what I'm trying to say, but no, I will bet all of my money that this is not the X-Men Quicksilver. My chief evidence is that the way the character is introduced, they clearly want us to be like, oh my god, is that Fox X-Men Quicksilver? Otherwise, why use Evan Peters at all? And yeah, I know the audio description for the hearing impaired for this episode says,
Wanda stares at the version of Pietro from the X-Men films.
And that's because the description just describes what we're seeing. And we're clearly seeing Evan Peters, the Pietro from the X-Men films. But they clearly also don't want to be definitely sure it's Evan Peters Quicksilver. If they did, he would just look like Fox X-Men Quicksilver. He doesn't look like it. He doesn't even sound like it. He kind of looks like a home brand version of Fox Quicksilver. And he sounds like,
long lost bro, get to squeeze his stinking sister to death or what?
I don't know, my cousin Vinny? Either way, he sounds nothing like either Pietro. Now, some people would say, yeah, that's because Wanda is warping things and people that come into her world is changed to fit the sitcom era. Well, no, for 2 reasons. The sitcom world at the time is in the 80s era, and we already have an 80s era version of Fox Quicksilver in Age of Apocalypse. And this version doesn't look and sound like him either. And Wanda, or whoever is controlling this, changed other people to play a role in this sitcom that's not their real identity. If they brought in a version of Pietro to be Pietro, not a random person, he would either act like MCU Pietro or Fox Pietro. There's no reason for him to sound and act like a completely different character that resemble neither character. Now, there are people who are saying it have to be Fox Quicksilver because obviously they're setting up to bring in the Fox X-Men. Well, I think you're putting the wish before the thought there. See, because Disney wouldn't want to bring in the Fox X-Men. The Fox X-Men continuity is a jumbled mess. All the fan favorite actors are no longer with the franchise. They have used up all their major X-Men plot lines, and if Disney is going to bring in the X-Men into the MCU, they're going to want to do their own version of those stories. This is getting a little bit too off topic, so I'll make a separate video about why I think the Fox X-Men is definitely not coming to the MCU if you guys want. Leave a comment below if you want me to talk about that. My point is, even if this is the Fox Quicksilver, he's not here to set up a crossover with Fox X-Men. So you can't to set up a crossover as a reason why you think this is Fox's Quicksilver. So if this is not a simple recast or X-Men crossover, what are the other options? Well, Here are some common theories that are floating around. That this is MCU Pietro resurrected, but with the face they just pulled from the multiverse, hence why he looked like Evan Peters. Well, that seems far-fetched. First of all, the difficulty in resurrecting people in the context of the show isn't about appearances. If the thing is that, yeah, Wanda can bring her dead brother back, but he will just look different, that's not really that big deal in the grand scheme of things. That little speech about how death is forever earlier in this episode wouldn't make any sense. And like I said, this character doesn't act like MCU Pietro, and he doesn't remember Vision. Another theory is that it is just another multiverse Quicksilver that Wanda pulled in. Well, there's nothing in this episode itself that ruled this out, but if they're going to do that, I don't think they would have chosen Evan Peters. Yeah, I like Evan Peters, and he was great as Quicksilver, but he's not an iconic casting like Heath Ledger as Joker or Robert Downey as Tony Stark, that they had to go back to him for Quicksilver. So they chose Evan Peters specifically for a reason, which lead me to who I think he's playing. I think he's a villain in disguise, because I believe they casted Evan Peters specifically to confuse and mislead. Wanda answering the door, saying a stranger that insists that he's Pietro, her dead brother, it's confusing and disorienting, right? You can see it all over her face. Well, Evan Peters casting add another meta layer of confusion and disorientation for the audience as well. If it were just Aaron Taylor Johnson standing there, sure, it's still a surprise because he's dead, but it's also a comic book show, people come back, and they've spent the episode talking about resurrections. But now, when it's Evan Peters, we're all confused. The message board are lit up with speculations and discussions, YouTube channels are calling boom mics zombie hands. It fits with this show feel of this very meta surrealness of a show within the show. Why would they need to confuse us unless he's not who he says he is? After all this, oh my god, what's happening? Who is he? It's not going to turn out to be he's just Quicksilver. No, they meant to disorient us because it's a fake out and he's a villain. And that's another reason why I think Evan Peters was hired, because he has experience being a horror villain in American Horror Stories. Which leads me to which villain I think he's playing. Well, my money is he's either working for Mephisto or Mephisto himself. I know. Right now everybody is saying everything is Mephisto, but it just adds up, okay? Mephisto have to be involved here. Everyone is talking about Wanda gaining reality powers, which she previously didn't have in the MCU, but no one is talking about what the possible source of that power could be. Well, Mephisto. He can shape time and space and have reality-altering powers. And in episode 5, they take the time to remind us that Wanda have never been called Scarlet Witch in the MCU, which I think means she'll get the name here in this show. And in religious mythology, how do people become witches? By making a deal with the devil, who is what Mephisto is for Marvel. And to those people who are saying Disney wouldn't have the devil in one of their shows, well, they don't have to call him, here's the devil, Prince of Darkness, Torturer of Souls, you know, from the Bible. They could just do the thing they have done for Thor and the Asgardians. They can have someone like Jimmy Woo say something like, he's an ancient being able to alter reality and empower people to do the same and making deals with them. A lot of different myths around the devil probably originated from him. Simple. You can have your cake and eat it too. Schrodinger's devil. But why would Mephisto be involved? Well, in the comics, he's connected to the creation of Tommy and Billy, Wanda's children. They were revealed to be pieces of his soul and were killed when he reabsorbed them. In fact, it was the witch Agatha Harkness who helped erase the twins from Wanda's memory when he reabsorbed them. And the character of Agnes in the show is already heavily implied to be Agatha Harkness. A few examples: the necklace Agnes always wears look very similar to a brooch Agatha Harkness wears in the comics. And Agnes has a rabbit named Senior Scratchy, and Agatha Harkness has a son named Nick Scratch in the comic. I think all signs points to Mephisto's being involved. Some would say Evan Peters could also be playing Mr. Pandemonium, who was an underling / was manipulated by Mephisto, but I think there's too many intermediaries here. Plus, Mr. Pandemonium is kind of a silly villain. I think they would much rather go straight to the source with Mephisto. No matter what though, I'm confident Evan Peters' character isn't simply just playing Quicksilver. But to the people who are hoping for the multiverse being introduced in this show, don't completely lose hope. Remember, Far From Home is set after this show. Something related to the multiverse could happen during the events of this show that either have worldwide implications or was widely reported upon in the world of MCU. This could inspire Mysterio to come up with his multiverse origin story, make Nick Fury / Talos more trusting of this story, and make J. Jonah Jameson call Mysterio
An interdimensional warrior.
Mephisto or whoever it is could be wearing the X-Men Quicksilver's face and can say something like, "I meant to disguise myself as your brother, but I must have grabbed the look from the wrong dimension in the multiverse," and simply multiverse introduced. And while I firmly believe the Fox X-Men won't cross over to become Marvel's version, I think references or cameos are definitely a possibility. And if Evan Peter is playing Mephisto, I do have a specific theory as to what exactly is he doing here and why he make an appearance now. I think he's here to make a deal, specifically now because Wanda is in the bargaining stage of her grief. My theory is that this show is centered around Wanda going through 5 stages of grief. I'm gonna go through this theory in a separate video, so don't forget to subscribe and click the little bell icon to be notified when it comes out. Leave me a comment below and tell me who you think Evan Peter is playing. Do you want him to be just Quicksilver resurrected, or are you more excited for him to be Mephisto? And because this is a new channel, feel free to leave me some feedback. Watch some of my older videos, subscribe and tell your friends. I really appreciate you watching. Peace.